Okay, in this exercise we're exploring another basic feature of Access. That's creating a select query, and we're going to first use a query wizard to create a simple query, and then we're going to modify it in various ways using the design view. And throughout we're going to look at the actual query that's being generated by something called the SQL view. I sent you an Access database called ourstudents.mdb. So just double click on that file and open up Access, and you should see here the students table. If you look over here under tables, so you have a students table and a transfer students table. Let's just quickly look at the students table. And if we look here, we have a social security number, a first name, a last name, an address, city, state, postal code, phone number, gender, credits, birth date, quality points, financial aid, campus, and major. And we have a whole bunch of different students here, a total of 24 students. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a question, a query, to ask a question to extract records from this table, and the specific query we're going to generate is give me a list of all students whose majors are undecided. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to click here. Here we have objects and tables. So the next under tables we have queries, and right now this database has no queries. And we're going to create a query by using a wizard. So I'm going to double click here on create query by using wizard. And then you select the table that you want to base your query on. So by default it has table students. If you chose a drop down list, it would also say table transfer students, which shows that you could select a different table besides students. We're going to just choose table students here. By the way, we're on page 121 in the book. This is chapter 3, exercise 2, creating a select query. At this point we selected the table, and it gives us the available fields within that table. And the fields that we want to take, what we want to find out about, we want to find last name. So I click on last name in this arrow to move it over to a selected field. I also want to use first name. So I'm going to click on first name, and I could either double click on first name to transfer it over, or I could click on this arrow. I also want phone number, and I want major. So we scroll down, we have major, and we want the credits. So those are all the fields that we want. And then we're going to click next to get to the next screen in the wizard. And then we have a choice between choosing a detail or a summary query. We want to use a detail query in this instance, so we're just going to click next. What title do you want for this query? So we're going to choose the name of this query is going to be undecided major. And that's going to give us a list of all students whose major has been undecided. Why would you want to find this out? Let's say you were working for the registrar's office, and after a specific amount of time that students have been in the program, they have to decide their major. So initially everybody has an undecided major until they declare their major. And let's say you want to get the results of this query. You're going to ask this question, you get a list of these students, and you do some kind of mail merge, and you mail them all that they have to come to the registrar's office and officially declare their major. So that might be something that you want to do. So we're going to call this query undecided major. And then we're going to click on finish. Now the book actually tells us to choose the option modify the query design immediately. I'm more of one who goes for instant gratification. I'd like to see what the query is going to give me right now before I make further modifications. However, one thing that I should note is that we haven't yet put anything into this query that says that I want it to be only people whose majors have been undecided. If we go back, you'll see that all that I did was I selected a bunch of fields: last name, first name, phone number, major, credits. There's nothing that I specified that the major should be undecided, that it should give me only such fields. So I'm going to click Finish here, and if I look here, it's going to give me a total of 24 records, starting me off at record 1, because I didn't specify that I only want people who fit a specific criterion. So it's giving me all people, although it's not giving all of the various fields. For example, in the original table we had a social security number, and we had a city and a state, etc. Here we don't have that. We just have the fields that I specified, namely last name, first name, phone number, major, and credits. Now, something very important when modifying tables, when modifying queries, or forms, or reports, is if we look in the top corner, there's this icon. That's a view icon, and by clicking on it, clicking on that icon, it will bring us immediately to some other view. The view that we'll switch to right now is the design view, which is probably the one that we want. But just to show you, there's a little drop-down list that gives you a list of all of the various views, and we could also look at something called the SQL view, SQL, which is a standard query language, which we're generating with everything that we do a question to ask the database, and the database is going to return some kind of result to us. And that question can be viewed in plain text, and that's what the SQL view will give us. So I'm going to click here just for a moment, and here we have, it says select student.lastname, students.firstname, students.phone number, students.major, students.credits from students. What that means is select each of these various fields. In other words, I want to see the last name field from the students table, the first name field from the students table, the phone number field from the students table, the major name, the major fields from the students table, and the credits field from the students table, and all of this from, and then I specify all the tables involved in this query, in this question. So I'm taking it from the students table. So that's behind the scenes. Everything that I did in this wizard is not really anything so fancy. It's just a graphical user interface to create this simple text that we have here. So let me now change to a different view. I'm going to change to the design view at this point. And this brings us from page 121 in the book to page 122. And namely, we're now at step 2. They want you here to maximize this little this window within the bigger Microsoft Access window. So we're going to click on the Maximize button here, and we have here two different panes. The first pane shows a list of all tables involved in the query. So here we only have one table involved in the query. We have the students table, and the bottom is for specifying various other aspects of the query, namely what fields we're using from that table and various criteria, and whether we're going to sort and show. We'll get to that later. But one thing that we want to do immediately, and they tell you to do this on page 122, is to move the mouse in between the two panes until you get resize handles, and you click and drag to make most of the screen be this top part, which shows the tables. And then we're going to resize. See, I'm moving over to this students table, and I'm moving right to the bottom of this little window here, and I'm clicking and dragging to show all the various fields within this table. So once again, we have the students table with all possible fields. See, we have a star, which means all the fields, SSN in bold, presumably because that's our primary key, first name, last name, address, city, state, etc. And then on the bottom, we have a list of all of the fields that are involved in the query. So we have last name from the students table, first name from the students table, phone number from the students table, major from the students table, and credits from the students table. And there's a little checkbox next to each of them, which means I want to show that in my final query. If I wanted to add a field to my query, let's say for example city, I could click on city here and drag it over to the bottom to one of the empty slots here, let go of it, and now I added city from the students table. And let's say I wanted to get rid of that from the query, so I would click at the very top of this column, and I would then press delete, and I would get rid of that. So this is my a way of generating a query visually. And I could have started actually, instead of using a instead of using the query wizard, I could have started in design view and created everything up to this point very simply. And maybe we'll do that in some later exercise. So they say check that you have all the necessary fields in the lower half of the window. We do. And now what we want to do is we want to add a criteria. So you see right over here we have criteria. And the criteria we want to add is by moving over to the major field. See major from the students table. The criteria is, I'm going to type the word undecided. And I'm going to press enter. And it automatically puts undecided in quotation marks. What this means is match students whose major is undecided. Namely the actual text undecided. If we want to see, every time I make a change here, I'm going to show you the SQL, the actual text that's being generated behind the scenes. I'm just going to quickly switch views here. I'm going to change from the design view to the SQL view, and here we have the same query as before, except at the end it says select students.lastname, students.firstname, students.phone number, students.major, students.credit from students, and we now added something called a where clause where it says where students.major equals undecided. So this is adding an extra condition that will only show those students who are undecided. Before we showed all 24 students, now we're only going to show students who are undecided. Let's actually, we'll change back to the design view, and if we want to actually see the results of the query, so we can, well, we'll do that in a second, but well, at any point if you want to run the query, there's this little red or orange exclamation mark which will run the query. So I'm going to run that. That's the same as moving into the datasheet view, but I'm going to run this, and here I no longer have 24 students. I have 5 students, namely the 5 students who are undecided, in somewhat random order. Now let's go back to the design view. The last thing they want you to do on page 122 is they want you to sort by the last name field. So here we have last name students in this first column here, last name from the students table, and we want to sort, and so we click in this sort box within this column, and there's a drop down arrow, and you can either sort ascending, descending, or not sort by this at all. So let's say we say sort ascending. So let's see what the SQL statement behind it is. So view, SQL view, and here we have the same where clause at the end, and it says where students.major equals undecided, and then at the very end it says order by students.last name, and the default way of sorting is ascending, so you don't have to specify that it's ascending. If we wanted to do it descending, let's go back to the design view for a second and say sort descending, and then we looked at the SQL view. It would say order by students.last name desk for descending. But we don't want that. We want to sort in ascending view, so I'm going to change this back to ascending, and then I'm going to run this query. And here we have sort by last name, so we have Coe, Cornell, Fraser, Horta, and Zacco. So you see that it's sorted in ascending order by last name. Let's go back to design view. And then they say click the save button to save the query. So far we have a query. Step 3 is to run the query. We've done that already. It's very simple. You just click on this exclamation mark. But so we'll just let's run this. And now here's an interesting thing. We're going to go to Ryan Cornell, who's the second guy here. And there's a little drop-down list next to where it says undecided. And we're going to say that Ryan Cornell's his major is now going to be declared as business. And so that's all fine and dandy. What we're going to show here is that changing values in the query changed the underlying table. So now I'm going to change back to design view, and then I'm going to try running the query again. And now instead of having 5 people in the major, or if I have 5 people with an undecided major, I have only 4 people with an undecided major. Ryan Cornell just dropped out of this these results because he no longer has an undecided major. This is possibly dangerous. it's possibly useful. For example, if you have this query that gives you this list, so somebody could go into the registrar's office, they run this query, they'll get the results, and so students could come in and say, now my major is business, and then you change you change it to business, and then that person, the next time you run the query, will no longer show up. But on the other hand, you might not want them to somebody to accidentally change it, in which case you want to modify the underlying table by hand or using some kind of other query or something like that. So we might want to hide the fact that the major is undecided here, and we'll only show people whose major is undecided, but don't give them the option. Don't show this underlying field so that they don't have the option to change it. Now, there's something interesting here. Notice that we have this drop-down list by undecided to give you a list of various majors, and those are the only options here: business, communications, education, engineering, liberal arts, or undecided. This is similar to the data validation using lists that we saw in Excel in one of the earlier presentations. So the question is, how do you specify that a specific field is going to be drawing values from a list? And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So let's just change to design view for a second, and I'm going to now I'll show you at the end of this entire thing, so we don't have too much of a digression. But it's a useful thing that we should talk about. Okay, so this is the end of step 3, which was on page 123. Now on to step 4, which is on page 124. And this is where we're going to modify the query, and we're going to add to the criteria. And namely, we don't want all students who are undecided. People who first come into the program are going to be undecided because they haven't decided yet. We don't want to start sending them mail warning them of dire consequences. We want to wait until they've been in the college for at least a year, which, let's say you take 15 credits a semester, so after 30 credits, so then you really should buckle down and decide your major. So we're going to click on this next, the last column here on the bottom, which says credits from the students table, and we're going to have the criteria is going to be greater than 30, and that means that if the students' credits are greater than 30. Let's see the underlying SQL. So I'm going to go to SQL view, and here I have the where clause now says where students' major is equal to undecided and students' credits is greater than 30. Let's go back to the design view. Now, notice that I put both of these criteria on the same line. It says criteria, major students is undecided, and immediately next to it, in the same row, in the same line, is greater than 30. But the next line says or, and if we scrolled it down, we'd actually see that there'd be more spaces there. But what you could really do is you could specify criteria either on the same row or on different rows. If you put them on the same row, then both things have to be true in order for a record to show. So it has to be both undecided and, that's why the word and was there in the query, and the credits have to be greater than 30. If I had put greater than 30 on a separate line, then it would have been an or. It would be either the student's major is undecided or their students are greater than 30. And I might want to do that if I want a list of all students who are undecided or students who have been in the college for a year. And sometimes you want a combination, sometimes you want both ands and ors, so then you put things that are ands on the same line and things that are ors on separate lines. Okay, so here we want it to be an and, so we're going to put it in the same row. And here, now we're going to try running the query. And here we only have 2 people left, because those are the people who have more than 30 credits. Namely, one person has 52 credits, the other person has 35 credits. And the rest of the rest of this exercise is just building a report based on that query, which we've seen in the past, so we don't have to focus on that. I mentioned something that was similar to data validation in Excel, namely that you could choose something from a drop-down list, from a list of predefined values. So let me just show you how you do that. I'm going to close the query right now, Do you want to save changes to the design of query on the side of major? Yes. And I'm going to go to the table view, and I'm going to go to the design. See, there's a button for open, there's a button for design. So I'm going to go to the button for the design of the students table, and I have SSN, first name, last name. I'm going to scroll down until I see major. And major, it says that it's a text type, but there are two tabs here. One tab says general, the second tab says lookup. And if we look at the lookup, we have a bunch of values in quotation marks separated by semicolons. Business, semicolon, communications, education, engineer, undecided, etc. And there's a way to to specify that something is going to be based on a lookup of values as opposed to just any text. And the way you would typically set this up is, instead of choosing the text type initially, you would click on the drop-down list and you have text, memo, number, etc. But the last option is a lookup wizard, and then the wizard gives you an option. I want the lookup column to look up values in a table or a query, or I will type in the values that I want. So let's say we say I will type in the values I want, and you click next, and then you enter in the various, keep the number of columns to 1, and you put in all of the various values. So let's say column 1, it could be hello, and the second column could be world, etc. And you just keep on adding various columns, and then you finish, and that's going to be the values that you could select from, which is, I'm just going to cancel out of this. But that's the way that you could establish a lookup. You could establish selection from a list, which is parallel to that data validation from a list in Excel. So much for Access. Try to do this exercise if you have time. You also want to study for the test, and I'll see you next Sunday.